We started Eclipse 10 years ago, really because, why does anyone start any type of business? Because they feel compelled by the fact that there's nobody else doing something that they feel is incredibly important. I think there's two things happening. The first is you have a couple generations of talent, let's say functional talent, engineering, operations, sales, marketing, product, program management, whatever it might be, that have grown up inside organizations like SpaceX or Tesla or Rivian or Palantir. And those have been tremendous training grounds. The second dynamic at play is tremendous functional talent and founder talent that has grown up building software is bored. They're tired of building in like the long tail of SaaS. Like, do we need an 11 payments company for small and medium sized X? These are hundreds of billions of dollars of enterprise value businesses. I think a lot of great founders are looking around and say there's big problems. If we solve those problems, there's tremendous value to capture.
Since ChatGPT launched in 2022, in the last 3 years, what have you seen at the intersection of the physical world?
I'm very excited about the distribution of large foundation models into the physical world for applications where that type of firepower is required. What I want to foster inside of our organization is a culture where everything's on the table, everything can be discussed, and then the work begins.
Seth, welcome to We the Builders.
Thank you for having me.
You're a partner at Eclipse.
I am.
Which is a multi-billion-dollar under management venture firm which focuses only on frontier tech or deep tech, which wasn't really a category of interest to anyone 3 years ago. I'm old enough to remember. 3 years ago, some of the biggest names in venture, were very cautious, and the kind of lines I heard were, it'll be really hard for this company to raise the next round. This is, these companies won't get funded. These are not the biggest markets, not the biggest opportunity, all sorts of those things, right? And software is like more suitable. But you guys have been doing it for 10 years.
That's right.
How do you feel about the microcultural movements that have popped up on since then, whether that's the EEC, microcultural Twitter movement, effective accelerationism, if you're familiar, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or, everyone for a while there on Twitter had EEC next to their names, and it was a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
Or whether that's the broader American dynamism sort of movement that, that sometimes pops up on our timeline.
Yeah.
3 years into this thing.
Well, for me, it's like 15 years into this journey, right? I started working at GE right out of school. That's where I really cut my teeth at the intersection of technology and product development and the industrial categories. We started Eclipse 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago. Really because, why does anyone start any type of business? Because they feel compelled that by the fact that there's nobody else doing something that they feel is incredibly important. And there certainly was a gap 10 years ago in the early stage institutional venture ecosystem around a willingness to lead institutional rounds into businesses that look like the ones that people are very excited about or increasingly more excited about today. These are full stack, product development efforts, oftentimes spanning silicon through the application layer. These are development programs where you need a multidisciplinary engineering team, from electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, embedded software, application software, data science, machine learning, and then you got to go figure out how to deploy it into the physical world. So there's an ops element to this. There's a supply chain management element. There's for sure a manufacturing and production side of this effort as well. And so those problems, a decade plus ago, were dead on arrival pitches for the most part in Silicon Valley. And for good reason, actually. I actually totally understand why that was. The application software layer was incredibly fertile ground to go build the new business, right? You had mature computing platforms, 3 of them, personal, mobile, and cloud, really coming of age. And a whole generation of venture capitalists that had been taught, the right growth rate metrics and the rule of 40 this and the LTV to CAC ratio that. And, in 2015, we sort of felt like,
I still don't know what that means.
In 2015, we felt like the silicon had been forgotten about in Silicon Valley. And so that was our opportunity. And that's what we've been maniacally focused and obsessed with for the last decade is how do we partner early with best-in-class founders building incredibly complex full-stack products to bring net new capabilities to the industries that operate in the physical world. Those capabilities can drive greater resilience, greater operational efficiency, change pricing models, change the way those businesses are valued as a result of that. And we think that that's a unbelievably large opportunity set. The 80% of global GDP that exists in the physical world is what we're focused on. And we're having a great time doing it. So how do I feel about the new entrants?
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. I love it. I think the tribe growing is a powerful thing, whether it's, whatever flavor of how you articulate your allegiance to a tribe of builders that are trying to solve problems in the physical world. Like I'm here for it all. I think it takes a big community to go solve hard problems. And I'm super excited about, the enthusiasm that increasingly more organizations, around the world have for solving these types of problems.
How many of some of these cultural movements, yes, are probably great for inspiring the next generation, right? And it's going to encourage more people to pursue either they go work in these sectors or they go build in these sectors. But do you think the pie of really great founding teams and going after the right problems and in the right markets, does that actually get bigger? Has that been getting bigger in the last 4 or 5 years?
In these spaces,
in these spaces, yeah.
Unequivocally, yes.
Okay.
I think there's two things happening. The first is you have a couple generations of talent, let's say functional talent, engineering, operations, sales, marketing, product, program management, whatever it might be, that have grown up inside organizations like SpaceX or Tesla or Rivian or Palantir. And those have been tremendous training grounds.
Right.
And so many of the founders that we see, they may be first-time founders, but they're not first-time leaders. They're not first-time decision makers. They're not first-time, GMs that are endeavoring to solve hard problems in the bits and atoms landscape. And so they're bringing with them a lot of those learnings and a lot of those scars in the back. And that's resulting in a greater talent density and, higher velocity as a result, because you're not making unoriginal mistakes along the way. Waymo, I think, is another great example of that. The second dynamic at play is tremendous, functional talent and founder talent that has grown up building software is bored. They're tired of building in the long tail of SaaS. Do we need an 11th payments company for small and medium size X? And so, and meanwhile, everybody globally got, red pilled during COVID, not being able to get functional necessities because supply chains were disrupted was something that everyone experienced, no matter your, socioeconomic status. You have to look far to see a Wall Street Journal headline that's got some manufacturing challenge, geopolitical challenge, defense inventory that's been depleted challenge. So big, challenging problems are all around us. And many of them seem like low-hanging fruit. And so, if you look at the market caps of, some of these, industrial businesses that operate in the physical world that really haven't changed much about their products or the way they do business for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, because they haven't had to, and they become aggregators, monopolies or duopolies in the space. These are hundreds of billions of dollars of enterprise value businesses. And so I think a lot of great founders are looking around and say there's big problems. If we solve those problems, there's tremendous value to capture. And the barriers to building a company that innovates at the bits and atoms intersection point have dropped precipitously. Now there's a tremendous amount of capital available. So the secular tailwinds behind frontier tech, deep tech, whatever you want to call the category, have just grown significantly over the last decade.
How do you define industrials?
How do I define industrials? I don't know. I don't think it matters. That definition doesn't really matter to me. I think the way I think about our opportunity set is everything problems that exist in the physical world. And those problems are all around us. And like those could be consumer problems. Those could be healthcare problems. Those could be energy infrastructure problems, transportation problems. And so like, does a transportation company fall into an industrial category as segmented by, the analyst groups at Goldman Sachs? Like maybe, I don't know. Does a healthcare, like, I don't know. I just look at these industries and sectors that operate in the physical world and see tremendous inefficiency and inefficacy. And at the same time, a massive dislocating set of technological tailwinds that's making it possible to bring new and novel solutions that are orders of magnitude better than the status quo.
Since ChatGPT launched in 2022 November or October, whatever it was, have there been any technological tailwinds, in the last 3 years for the physical world?
Yeah.
And what capabilities are overestimated? Like now, or maybe in the last 3 years, what have you seen at the intersection of the physical world, right? Like, where is the most utility? What's the lowest hanging fruit?
What's the lowest hanging fruit?
Yeah.
I don't know what the lowest hanging fruit is, but I would say I'm very excited about the distribution of large foundation models into the physical world for applications where that type of firepower is required. I mean, these models are very good at solving multivariable problems, right? And so like, does every robotics problem require an end-to-end foundation model that's many billions of parameters or tens of billions of parameters? No, probably not, but some do. And we often hear that these LLM research labs are like, because of talent, migration, plus or minus like 6 months ahead or behind one another. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the distribution methodology for that cognitive AI capability is pretty well known and pretty well baked. And that's not the case in some of these physical world applications of AI. And so if you take I'm on the board of a company called Wave, for example, that really pioneered end-to-end foundation models for the self-driving application, or really for mobility in the physical world.
Can you say more about what the company does?
Yeah, they develop a large end-to-end foundation model to enable all different types of vehicle morphologies to move safely and reliably through the physical world. Initially focused on basically being the FSD for everyone else, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Partnering with automotive OEMs, providing a better than FSD like driving experience and navigating the SAE levels, the safety levels for autonomy. So from L2 through into L3 and all the way up into L4 and unmanned. There's a lot of hard engineering problems that they have to go solve that are not even model related, right?
Yeah.
So if your embedded software is really quite terrible on the car, then it doesn't matter how good your model is. And if you've got challenges around optimizing that model to run at the edge, on the SoC that you're leveraging, like it doesn't really matter how good the model is. And, if you don't have good infrastructure to test and validate and, evaluate model performance in a safety critical environment, then you're never going to be allowed to, have that capability proliferate into the physical world, into safety critical environments. So there are a lot of engineering execution challenges that are required to be solved in order for model level capability to be distributed out into the physical world. And I like that because I'm a big disciple of like the Jeff Bezos adage that hard is our moat, right? If I solve these hard problems, if I take on this amount of complexity and marshal resources effectively to, execute with excellence over these challenges, then somebody else is going to have to do the same thing in order to catch up to me, or in order to do what I'm doing, and I've got the head start. And so I look at a lot of the execution challenge, the engineering execution challenge, not the science risk, and that's like a really important line of demarcation that we talk about a lot at Eclipse. I don't want to take science risk, net new invention risk, but I'll take as much engineering execution risk as I can get my hands on. If you put the right teams in place and they're focused on massive opportunities, then good things tend to happen.
I think, we had Colin Greenspan on the pod. He was at Narya Capital, also a very concentrated strategy.
Colin's great. We're co-investors in a tremendous company called True Anomaly.
Oh, yes. And so he talked about this where, you're in venture, you have to like stay constrained in the 10-year sort of commercialization time period and anything outside of that, which is, I think, similar to, like, if it's a science risk, it's a variable. It's a huge variable. It could be 5 years, it could be 3 years, but it could also be 20. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm just not that smart. I'm not going to be able to predict like when net new invention is going to occur.
Yeah.
So I need to be able to underwrite towards a world-class product experience that delights customer, that that customer is willing to pay significant amounts of money for whatever that solution is, and there are a lot of those customers out there. And so there are examples of companies. I invested in a company called Oxide. It's a compute infrastructure company. We led the first 2 rounds of the business starting in 2019. They went live with their first true production customers last year. So that was a long development effort, right? And a period in POC land where they're really kind of gleaning as much of the learnings as they possibly could from deploying to a small subset of customers. Those types of long development programs and the capital required to fund them aren't for the faint of heart, but there's a clear and demonstrable playbook that you can run to affect the right outcome. And on the other side of delivering to those customers is just an extraordinarily large market. There are a few markets that are as large as the one that they're going after. And so now they have that full head of steam to go commercialize with, a lot of excitement around them.
You refer to the Jeff quote on hard as a moat, right? I'll bring up a Peter sort of quote from 0 to 1, which is not a quote exactly, but I think he talks about differentiation and monopolies a lot.
Mm-hmm. And he talks a lot in that book about how he feels about competition.
Yes.
Not wanting competition.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I know you guys do a lot of incubations at Eclipse, and tell us how you think as you develop theses for like what companies like you would like to fund or you would like to see exist. How do you think about that framework?
I think a lot of things, it's not rocket science, right? Like there's kind of 3 buckets of what we look to go underwrite or at least find or build in an excellent fashion, right? And it's team, it's differentiated, technology-driven product capability, and its magnitude of the market. Now, if you double, triple click into those categories, there's a lot of nuance and questions that we ask and signal that we look for, both quantitative and qualitative, that informs what we think is a world-class early stage investment opportunity. And our effort inside of Eclipse is, we've really from day one institutionalized a culture around driving those thesis development oriented discussions. And so, literally down to like, there's 2, we don't have a lot of meetings internally. There are 2 internal meetings every week that are just thesis conversations, thesis discussions. And, there's different levels of, let's say, development for those theses. If an early stage idea might just be like a 500-word memo about some crazy idea, right? And so nothing's off the table, anything from any direction. In 2016, I was beginning to develop a thesis around unmanned aviation systems that could move people and cargo in 2016, right? And so initially that was kind of laughed at, but the ideas that become societally altering over time are usually the ones that sound silly or sound insignificant, that are underestimated, that are thought to be too contrarian. And so what I want to foster inside of our organization is a culture where everything's on the table, everything can be discussed, and then the work begins. And I think like because we're very focused as an organization, we don't have the crypto partner or the SynBio like small molecule discovery, or the down the fairway enterprise HR lifecycle management software. This is what we do, and everybody in the partnership comes from places like GE and Samsara and Apple and Rivian and Tesla and the like. And so as a result, everyone's kind of speaking the same language, and the density of talent networks and the density of customer networks is quite significant. And so everyone in the organization is probably 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from the right 2 or 3 customers to talk to as you're beginning to unravel a potential thesis idea. And so like that's often where we go next. It's like, okay, this is interesting. Intuitively, this sounds like a big idea. How do we go get into the meat and potatoes of this? And for me, that always starts with the market. Early in my career, I would fall in love with the technology.
Yeah.
I learned from my mentor, Pierre Lamond. It's like, what are the 3 most important things when you're looking at an early stage company? Market, the market, the market. And people obviously is a piece of that as well, and we can come to that if you want. But our thesis development, progression really requires like a maniacal focus on the market dynamics.
I guess like that's a very fair point where because the team is so focused, those thesis 2 meetings a week, right, they compound because all of you go back, do the homework and meet people, and then you all come back with different insights, and that like moves things forward at probably 10x the speed, right? Because if 10 people from the team get on the table and they're talking about the same thing next week, then
we're generating at least 1, sometimes 2 net new theses a week. There's 60 plus theses a year. Now, not all of those are getting into
it's
like
a funnel.
the progress, all the way to a place where it's right. We're not very creative. I think we call it like 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. So 3.0 being the most progressed. Not all of them get there. We'll kill things along the way, and we actively work to kill new ideas, so that we can stay focused. But the things that make it through the pressure testing, have resulted in being in a position to engage with a early stage company, with a founder, with a highly prepared mind.
Right.
And I think like that's the most important thing for me. Like the most powerful moment for me is when a founder and a contrarian idea who's been told no 50, 100 times comes and meets with us, and we've spent a year, 2 years, 3 years fleshing out an idea in a similar space, or a similar idea in that space.
Yeah.
And I could say, hang on, let me show you our work on that. And I can almost like reverse pitch that founder.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, like they're off their, you're able to change the nature of the conversation.
Yeah.
And the conversation becomes, okay, we both actually believe with unbelievable amounts of conviction that there's something to do here. And then how do we go do it? How do you go build the thing? Building a company is, how much ink has been spilled about how hard it is to build a company, chewing glass, all this kind of stuff. It's really freaking hard. And so having alignment from the jump on like why it matters, why it's a problem of significance, why it's something that we should spend time on is a really powerful like moment in the early stages of partnering with founders in the ecosystem.
Is there an example you can publicly share? And then I have a question about Peter, which I'll come back to.
I don't know Peter, so I don't know how well I can answer that
question.
Isn't
the market quote that you gave? Yeah.
What's an example of I think Alex Kendall I don't know that 100 people told them no, but at the time, if you think about when we led the Series A in 2019 of Wave, this was like the height of like Cruise's powers and Waymo's increase, and like Argo, and Brian Selesky had just founded Argo, and
Applied Intuition.
Applied Intuition, I think, had begun, but Applied wasn't focused on AV at the time, right? But like these are the big bad AV 1.0 companies. Right. Aurora, Chris and Sterling had just gotten Aurora going. And then here come these 2 25-year-old postdocs out of Cambridge pitching a completely different architectural approach. One that was driven by what they'd experienced in, early instantiations of deep learning. And so I think that was a pretty contrarian view at the time. And a lot of organizations a lot of great investors passed on that company because of how contrarian it was. And, my position, having worked in robotics, for many years, prior to that moment, made me put me in the mindset of saying, hey, I know how hard it is to make these small AGVs in a warehouse, for example, with the similar technology stack to what's being used in these self-driving AV 1.0 companies. I know how hard it is to do that environment. If I try to take that technology stack and go put it on consumer roadways, that's going to be a challenge that really only companies with almost infinite amounts of capital to be able to go brute force their way to the level of reliability and performance you need are going to be able to achieve. And so I think my skepticism about the 1.0 approach and my experience in robotics put us in Eclipse and our collective view a point in a good position to go receive a very contrarian pitch from Alex.
Well, this is probably a good segue. What was your role at GE?
Oh man, I was there for a few years in my early 20s. I was in a position early on where I had visibility to how some of the senior leaders at GE were trying to turn that company, that 140 or 150-year-old business, into the 21st century by adopting digital capabilities and across their business units. And I think a lot of ink has been spilled, in the last 10 years about what they got wrong. I would come back and say, like, look at the backlog that GE Vernova has.
Right.
Look at the way, their additive manufacturing business has found some success. And say, I think those leaders were absolutely spot on in their vision of how the world was going to unfold. They might have been a bit too early, but much of what formed, much of what drove the formation thesis of Eclipse and kind of like how we've operated in this world for the last decade was informed by my experience at GE. Seeing how these industrial businesses were going to be transformed by technology. And understanding how important that was going to be, and the prediction was going to be that they would maybe take a little longer or struggle, and a lot of what they needed to adopt was going to come from the startup ecosystem.
What were some of the most consequential insights you developed during your time there, and that, in hindsight, I guess now, and what's something you learned about how to operate that still stands true?
Customers of technology solutions in industrial categories, they just want it to work. It's got to work. And the bar for reliability, the bar for throughput, the bar for safety is super high. And there's nothing like deploying robotic solutions into an industrial environment and it not working and it causing downtime to make you understand like that pain.
Right.
And so that's really informed, a lot of my early stage investments.
Yet in a blog post, you make a case that, where you talk about failures of these companies and them learning from it, that you still have to ship, and then learn from that.
So this is really important because I both are true. You need to do everything you possibly can to understand the requirements of your customer environment and architect a solution and then engineer a solution that can achieve those performance capabilities. You're not going to get it right out of the box, though, the first time.
Right.
No one does.
Yeah.
And so there's this flywheel that has to happen where you need to do as much work as you can in CAD and in Excel and, in prototyping, but eventually you got to ship it and go see how this thing does. And one of the things I look for in early stage teams is, do they have the willingness to ship? A lot of teams will wait until it's perfect. So that's not great. Do they have the rigor to know that they're not ready to ship? Like, how do they find that moment? And then the best teams who have been through this before know that it's like, you're going to get punched in the face.
And how do you manage that relationship then?
And so how have you selected a design partner and managed that design partner's expectations and built stakeholder support so that you can go into that environment and it's not going to be perfect. It might be messy, but you've prepared them. And then how does your team respond? Right? Oftentimes, like, the difference between a good pilot and a bad pilot is just like the grit and tenacity of the team that's holding this thing together with, like, duct tape and chewing gum. And so how does the team respond? And then the most important thing is what happens right after that pilot's over. You're battered and broken. It didn't work. Morale is low. How do you get quickly back up on the horse, take all the learnings that you experienced, incorporate it into your Gen 2 development program, and attack that with vigor? And so that can be, depending upon the solution that you're developing, the market you're going after, a 12-month, 9-month, 12-month, 16-month cycle. And you can learn a lot about a small collection of individuals, as they go through that process. And so when I look to, double down or compound capital into seed stage or Series A companies that we've invested in, I'm looking a lot at kind of like, how do we navigate that really challenging period?
I'm sure it's like very different for every company. I think so a lot of the 10 listeners we have, they're mostly Series A founders, or I would say like younger investors who are watching, is there
younger investors? How old am I, bro?
Probably mid-20s, I would say. Yeah, you're not still in your mid-20s, are you? Did you?
I'm not.
So is there like an example you can share of a conversation with a customer after the pilot did not work, and how do you navigate these conversations? You can anonymize like the specifics, but
it all comes down to honesty and transparency. Supply chain logistics, I have a tremendous amount of experience kind of through this period, investing in these types of companies that go through that
Right.
period. If you tell them what you're going to do, are transparent and honest about where the risk is, but equally, honest and get their buy-in on why this is worth doing, why it can be transformational for the business, not a nice to have, but a need to have. And then you are the first one in and the last one out every shift. And when things aren't working, you're right on top of it. You notify them when there's problems, not them coming to you. Like that's a good recipe for engendering the right type of customer sentiment and support. Now you got to get there, you got to deliver, right? But if you're grinding your way to get there, like that's a pretty good recipe. Let's say in more higher stakes environments, let's say defense, for an example.
Right.
When things don't work, that can be a pretty scary moment for a company. And it demands, for all these types of situations, it demands, great leadership. But I would say the spotlight is even brighter in those moments from the customer, because you really got to go, explain with transparency and honesty and in an extremely forthcoming way, like what's not working and what you're going to do about it. And that root cause analysis process and the rigor with which you execute that process, the professionalism, the depth, can go a long way to engendering confidence in the customer, even despite the fact that you weren't successful. And they'll give you, it could be that they might give you another shot.
At the end of the day, it just comes down to relationships.
At the end of the day, everything just comes down to relationships and in honesty and transparency.
Yeah. Okay. So, proactive communication, and
rigorous documentation, comprehensive plan for like, hey, this is what happened. This is where we messed up, or this is what we didn't get right. Here's our plan to remediate that. Here's what you can expect to see from us on this timeline, this timeline, this timeline. And here's how we will close the loop objectively to understand whether or not the solutions that we've put into place to solve for the problem you experienced are actually solutions.
I think like for earlier founders who are still like trying to find a design partner, this is like good feedback. Let's go.
Can I make one comment on that?
Please.
I think design partners are people too, and to get these
as our investors,
investors maybe, I don't know, not all of them. But I always say, when people ask me about like regulatory dynamics, I always say like regulators are people too, right? And I think so. Design part. These are human beings. These are people that like want to advance their careers, that like want to take a risk, that want to go out on a limb. And so if you articulate that like the thing that you are endeavoring to provide them moves the needle materially, you're going to find people that you should be able to find. If it does that, you should be able to find people to like take a bet. But then you become partners, like not the partner side of that, and how you treat people, how you partner with people, how you get aligned in the trenches to go do a hard thing, it is just a really important aspect of that. Because if you're successful, they should realize the similar levels of upside associated with that success, career advancement and more responsibility and all that kind of stuff. And I think I often see that a lot of early stage companies don't think about it in that way.
It's also, I think like for the design partner on the other end, they also have to be somewhat high, have a high risk profile where they're taking the same venture bet you are, right?
That's right.
As an investor. And
that's right. You also have to like elucidate with a level of precision, like, does this individual, does this stakeholder, does this sponsor have the juice within their organization to help unblock, to help give me air cover, to help, communicate up the chain effectively what's actually happening. And so, you need to do like customer criteria. Developing customer criteria for why you choose one customer versus another is important, but like you should also be super rigorous around design partnerships. Are you talking to the right people? Is this the right organization? The worst thing that can happen coming out of a successful pilot is all of a sudden there's no budget, or that person doesn't have the ability to actually I did all this work, I went through hell to go deliver, and I don't get to realize the upside associated with that. So, how you select those partners is super, super important.
So I have a question there, where especially for defense companies, I was just talking to one of my portfolio founders. What happens is that, people either retire, who were your champions in the government, especially, right? Or they get stationed somewhere else. They get transferred, and now all of a sudden your champion, who was the program director, officer, or whatever, is gone. How do you navigate that? And I guess like find multiple champions. Do you go top down? Do you go bottoms up? Like no right answers.
The go-to-market in the defense category is probably one of the, if not the hardest go-to-market motions out there. It's 4D chess. You need, you need warfighter support. You need supply chain officer support. You need program office at multiple levels in the program office, not just the PEO. You need a ground game in DC. You need to champion the executive branch. You need to champion the legislative branch. How do you get plus ups into the NDAA? Like there's a CRO at one of the companies I'm on the board of, it's in the defense tech space. She often says, if you don't know who's winning the RFP, then it's not going to be you, right? If you weren't upstream shaping this thing, defining the requirements, really doing that legwork.
But for seed companies that are not well capitalized, right? I think
it's really challenging. I think we have not. We've made a couple of concentrated bets in the defense tech category, but we have not become volume investors in defense tech because I actually think it's one of the in most categories, this is the case where best technology doesn't always win, but I don't think it's any more true than in the defense tech space. And so it's not enough to have a great widget.
No,
you need a monster at the helm on the go-to-market side to really go drive efficacy, drive the company forward effectively.
Okay, let's do a situation here where there's a seed company that has raised 5 to 10 million. They can't spend $1 million lobbying, a month, or doing all sorts of events and stuff, right? In DC. What are the right early hires for them for that go-to-market motion?
I honestly, at that stage, it's got to be the founders.
It has to be the founders.
Yeah.
Okay, so if the founders don't have a fit with or experience infiltrating, DC, or if they're not quick learners, then that's it. It's not gonna work. It can't be hires.
It would be tough for me.
Yeah,
it'd be tough for me.
Interesting.
I don't think that's one where you're because if they raise like $5 to $10 million, you're not going to go be able to pay someone the salary, and they need a year in order to be your. So if you don't, I would say if you are at that stage as a business and you don't have those relationships that inside either within the the warfighter environment or the PEO side of things, I would endeavor quite quickly to go stack the deck strategically in your favor and use what you have, which is equity.
Right.
If you're attacking a problem that's of consequence, that's high magnitude, that's a clear need, then you should be able to go sell the best people in the world to come become an independent board member or an advisor, or come join you full time for a certain amount of equity. And so that's what I would focus on.
Actually, on that note, so there are these companies, $30 to $50 million ranges, who are looking for those advisors, right? Which is, okay, do we need a retired admiral? Do we need?
You got to be super careful.
That's usually the playbook, right?
You have to, but you have to be super careful because those folks are stacking up boards and getting lots of advisory comp and equity comp to be advisors and stuff like that, and then there's a half-life on their relevancy inside the right channels and stuff. So you have to be super careful about that. I think
what
with
have
all,
you seen there? Yeah,
I think
I
that,
think this is a very tricky like sort of situation they're navigating because they can't get current people obviously, but for how like far back can they be relevant? What government they're now navigating like the political landscape all of a sudden?
I think like with anything, you have to do the work to understand what the level of substance and credibility in the individual is
Right.
that will, and their conviction in your mission, their
Mm,
willingness to like, you know, put a hard hat on and go to work for you,
right.
beyond just, clipping the,
Getting advisors to work
yeah,
is a whole different.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
again, I come back to everything starts and ends with like in this space with the quality, the relationships, the vision of the founding team from that early stage. And then
Yeah.
as you progress and find success commercially and you're able to raise more capital, then it becomes about like the team that you build. Right. And that
Right.
can be the board you structure, the advisors that you bring on board, the management team. And so, when you're building a team, you're seeking to elucidate like how mission oriented are these individuals at all levels of the company.
Yeah.
What's their level of grit, tenacity, capability, credibility, and are they going to be maniacally focused on helping the company achieve, the outcomes that the company's focused on quarter over quarter, year over year. And so anybody who's coming in kind of like as a, you know, 20 hours a week, 10 hours a
Mm,
week, relationship for hire type or relationship
right.
network for hire, like that's typically not a great
Yeah, that
recipe.
relationship person either needs to be the founders themselves or, someone who's
I
full
mean,
time
the best
bought
I've
in on
ever,
the
the
mission.
best
Yeah.
first time founder I've ever seen at doing this in the defense tech space is Evan Rogers from True Anomaly.
True. Not okay.
He is as
Yeah.
tied into what is happening in a rapidly developing Space Force, Space Systems Command, NRO landscape as you possibly could be.
We gotta get him on the pod with Colin, maybe. That'd be
He
fun.
he's tremendous, and so he's kind of my archetype for what I look for. I don't think I'll ever find anybody as good as him again because he's an N of one type individual, but that's kind of the standard for me.
But also each entrepreneur looks different.
That's true. That's actually super true. Killers come in all shapes and sizes.
Yeah, they come in all shapes and sizes.
All shapes and sizes.
So okay, I guess bottom line is that if you're having trouble finding a mission aligned champion within a customer, within the government, whether that's hires, advisors, whatever, it's time to think about what you're doing.
If you like, when I think about chapters of company progression and like this first chapter, this first like proof of concept chapter,
right?
The two things I look for in the founding team is, can you build for sure? Can you build a great team? Can you build a prototype solution? All that kind of stuff. Are you focused on the right, things that help drive high levels of learning in the business as quickly as possible? But equally as important is, can you sell? Can you sell? Like the best engineers can go work anywhere. Can you convince the best engineers that your thing is the thing they should spend, all of their time for years focused on? Can you convince investors?
Yeah.
Can you convince customers?
Right.
So like the first few years of a company's formation period is all about selling.
Yeah.
And effective selling looks different. There are many different ways to sell effectively.
Right.
But the outcome is what you measure. The results are what you measure. And so I really look for, can you build, can you sell?
Or, if it's a co-founding team, ideally both.
That could be.
Yeah.
That could be. So I said founders.
Yeah.
Founders, right?
Okay. Fascinating. Let's talk about some of the theses you've had and what was your process for developing these. You mentioned there's one thesis for a company you were thinking about for 6 years as we were walking up here. Can you talk a little about that?
I'm very excited about a company in our portfolio called Mytra. Mytra was founded by a bunch of executives and former founders actually out of Tesla and Rivian, these types of organizations. They are building general purpose industrial automation for the supply chain logistics category. The best closest proxy for the solution would be the automated storage and retrieval systems that you've seen from places like AutoStore or Ocado or the case pick solution from Symbotic. There are a lot of challenges with those solution architectures. You have a lot of complexity in the hardware design, which results in challenging both performance, reliability, but also cost structures for the vast majority of the market. I was looking to invest in a company that was attacking that from a more modern architectural perspective.
How did you come to care about the problem?
I came to care about the problem because I was an early investor in a company called Six River Systems. Eclipse was an investor in Six River Systems, and as well as in Kindred. These were kind of what I would call like Gen 1 modern robotics companies for the supply chain logistics category. Post Kiva Systems acquisition, you saw Robotics really realize like, hey, this isn't just the philosophy degree of the computer sciences. You can make real products and generate real value. And so you saw a ton of different startups get launched in this very, very nascent computing category. Most failed, but some were successful. And I was fortunate to be invested in a couple of the more successful ones in that first wave. But what I would characterize those solutions as broadly point solutions. And so, they're only addressing a very small subset of the overall material flow inside a distribution facility. And as a result, what I began to observe was the GMs that manage these large distribution facilities were seeing this proliferation of point solutions. And your overall performance is only as good as the lowest performing, variable in that equation. And so one crappy solution could disrupt the entire material flow. And so the pendulum kind of swung back the other way, where these GMs that were convinced to go adopt automation by their C-suite were like, this isn't working. I'm going back to what I know, which is manual labor, and we'll deal with the high turnover rates. And so I saw that, and what it made me come to realize was if you had a no compromise solution that the vast majority of the market could access and get an ROI from, that was flexible and drove density and throughput and had high levels of reliability, and could address a significant portion of overall material flow, 50, 60, 70%, that's a winning solution. And so I set out to go find a company that was endeavoring to build that. There were some things that we evaluated but didn't find the right fit. And then Chris Walty, the founder and CEO of Mytra, walked in the door, and he had kind of been experiencing a similar problem during his time at Tesla. And so we both, kind of mind melded over, A, this is a big problem. B, I think the time is right technology wise to go build this type of solution. And C, if we build the right team, we know we have design partners that we can go, to establish that early validation relationship with and move aggressively to go get into production. And so Eclipse led the seed round there. We kind of built it out of Eclipse in the summer of 2022. We led the Series A. Green Oaks led the Series B, and the company's now in production, doing exactly what we hoped that we'd be able to do.
No, congrats. It looks like it's on its way to, great success. So I think we couldn't chat about incubations enough, and you do other incubations as well. And I'm sure these people don't just walk through the door. There's, ways of like how you're looking at talent as well. And, I think you referenced earlier that killers come in all shapes and sizes. But most of the killers I've heard about so far are either ex-Rivian, ex-Tesla, or ex-SpaceX. So is it that people outside of these experiences are usually not suited, or do you keep an open?
No, I think those companies, Waymo, I would add in there.
Right.
Anduril, I would add in there. Palantir, I would add in there. I'm not an investor in either of those companies.
That's what I meant. That set of companies, like 6, 7.
Those are great training grounds,
right?
And so if you think about the types of businesses that we are endeavoring to build, these businesses that execute development cycles at the intersection of bits and atoms, those are companies that have done that really successfully, time and time again, across a wide variety of products. And so it stands to reason that the talent that was, key to pushing those businesses forward has got just great experience doing that. And also many of these people, have ambitions to be founders of their own businesses. So it's a great, those are fertile networks to go find great founder talent in. I don't think I'm not inventing anything here. There's a lot of people that probably think that way.
Right.
We've, from the inception of Eclipse, we've always thought of ourselves as more, operators with capital than investors and like pure play investors.
Mm.
And while thesis development has been very core to the firm from inception, we got frustrated, I would say, starting like 2017, 2018, when we like couldn't find the right investment opportunities for some of these theses. And we kind of remembered, like, hang on a second, like, we built products, we've started companies before. Why can't we do that here? And so we did a couple ad hoc examples of that over those over the first few years, and then really formalized that effort, that BuildCo effort in 2021. And I think, in the last two funds, early stage funds, about, I'd say 20%, maybe 25% of total capital invested have been into seed stage companies that we've built out of Eclipse.
The thing I hear, I did some research around this and asked a lot of very successful venture studios, right, on how they incubate. And there are a couple around deep tech that we know of. Some worked out, some didn't.
Mm-hmm.
The consistent, I think, challenge is finding the talent or the teams to go pursue these ideas and treat them as their own. I think something we were chatting about earlier as well, which is developing the same amount of passion for these opportunities as you have.
Yeah.
And usually the average I've gotten is it comes out to be 2 years to find these like people. So how are you doing this differently?
I think people are definitely the rate limiting factor.
Yeah.
So I would agree with that. I used to be kind of a disciple of like the benchmark adage of, I'm not smart enough to predict the future, but I can see when lightning strikes. I think that's like paraphrasing something along those lines. I have 180'd on that. I think that you can think critically about problems that exist in the physical world, and you can do rigorous work to understand what types of companies, products, services, solutions can be built that, if they solve those problems, can give birth to a generational company. And all we're endeavoring to do at Eclipse is like drive that discussion, use our platform, our access to customers primarily, to then go find people that we think are uniquely suited to take the reins of that idea. Before it's a company, it's an idea, and make it their own. And, what I want more than anything is to be able to help best in class founder talent that has ambitions to be founders, be prevented from focusing on ideas that aren't big enough. You know what I mean? The worst thing in the world would be to start a company, get 3 to 4 years into the journey and realize, oh my God, I did all this work, but it's not pointed at a problem of significance.
Yeah.
And so we are creating an environment where we can pressure test those ideas quickly, and help people go through the ideation maze rapidly to get to a place where they have full-throated conviction that they want to go spend the rest of their life working on this problem.
Is it that the software era of 2010s in the last like 15 years has eroded the thinking ability of a lot of younger people, or a lot of this talent that wants to go on the founding journey, where they don't think as long and hard about what opportunities to pursue?
No, I don't think that's the case at all.
No,
I don't think the software period eroded the tenacity or the rigor with which people evaluate
ideas to pursue.
No, I think like there's always probably been a bell curve, right? There's probably like a certain level of capability that exists at the far end of the bell curve when it comes to thinking from first principles about problems that are worth working on, and then the solution sets that are best positioned to be able to go solve those problems. And I think those types of people come in all shapes and sizes as well, and all ages, right? And all experience, all experience sets.
Yeah, of course.
It's like that's more than anything what we're trying to drive is like that type of rigorous discussion,
right?
And then position that early fledgling fragile idea with the best odds of success, position it with the most improved odds of success on a very arduous journey.
Is there a non-obvious place, we'll beep it out, where you're looking for talent outside of these 7-8 companies that we talked about that we should know about? A great training ground?
I think now we're at a place where Eclipse is of a vintage where, we're seeing repeat founders come from the portfolio. Like like the company I mentioned previously, Six River Systems, was founded by Rylan and Jerome. Rylan is now on his second company, Blue Water Autonomy. And we led the seed round there. And then we're seeing founder talent come from inside some of our most mature companies. So companies like Cerebras Systems and Tenstorrent and Wave and these types of businesses. So
talent also compounds within
those companies, because now like we think those companies that are succeeding at scale commercially to a large degree have become great training grounds for a lot of the next generation of founders that we endeavor to go partner with. But I don't want to get anybody confused. Alex Kindle was a postdoc out of Cambridge that had done an internship at Skydio when we led around into his company. So, there's tremendous examples historically of people with very little experience whatsoever who have had just steep slopes of attack, personally and professionally, and have resulted in, that have built tremendous companies and grown, quite quickly during that period of time and become some of the most important leaders in the technology sector today.
Speaking of PhDs, do you have any thoughts on AI and science? A couple of interesting announcements from Google DeepMind, one from OpenAI about a month ago or something with Retro Biosciences, I think. And Google DeepMind did an announcement with, I think, Commonwealth Fusion Systems. Yeah, and some research they're conducting together.
I don't have much to share on Commonwealth and DeepMind. I do think.
Oh no, just generally, like, I guess.
I think that the magic of these large models is going to touch every fabric of society. That's a big statement, but like how we build.
Right.
I'm really excited about the intersection of large models and design capabilities, chip design, PCB design, electrical layout design. Like we're seeing a bunch of different opportunities. We've invested in a few companies. We're seeing a lot of different opportunities there that I think are interesting. I think transportation has been an area that I've focused on for quite some time, and autonomy at the intersection of transportation, I think is going to change. Everything's going to be different as a result of it. What happens when, you've democratized access to private aviation?
What happened? Better air traffic control.
Actually, the ATC system is pretty good.
Okay.
What happens when you can get in your car, press a button, it takes you safely and reliably to wherever you want to go, and you don't have to pay attention?
Hopefully, humans become more productive.
Hopefully, they become productive.
Yeah.
It probably changes the value of real estate.
Right.
Where would you choose to live if that's the case?
Oh yeah. So let's start investing in suburbs. Not investment advice.
I don't know. I'm not a real estate investor, but I think it's interesting. Like if you think about a lot of the first order investments that Eclipse has made over the last 10 years, directly influence the cost structure, primary line items of cost structure in most businesses that operate in the physical world. And I would broadly identify those as being labor, transportation costs and energy costs. And if you believe in a world where the marginal cost of a kilowatt hour or a metric ton moved per mile, or the labor unit that you're conducting over that hour rapidly approaches zero or close to it over the next few decades, what does it do to the industrial categories, the legacy categories that what does it do to the businesses that are architected to address those industrial categories today? I think they get, if they don't pivot, if they don't change the way they're architected, then you're susceptible to disruption. I also think if you drop those cost structure elements precipitously, what new opportunities exist? I'm really interested in food production, food supply chains. I think that's a
what part of food supply chains?
Well, I think
Did you think? Do you believe with the RFK? Wider conversation around how the
make America healthy again.
Yeah. And also
whatever your politics are, I don't.
A lot of poisonous. We're being fed a lot of poison. A lot of this supply chain is not healthy.
Yeah, I do. We've industrialized food
Yeah.
production in this country. It's resulted in like soil degradation and nutrient density has collapsed. And as a result, in order to continue to see the yields needed to make the business model work, we coat all of our produce with all types of things during its growing cycle that probably in some way, shape, or form is not good for the human body.
Right.
So I think that's an obvious issue.
Yeah.
You know, from a processing perspective, like we send a lot of our food to be processed in China. That's a national security risk.
Right.
You know, two of the largest private companies in the world right now, you know, are food companies like Tyson, Cargill, like these types of companies. I think Tyson's a private company. You know, they've basically consolidated all of the meat production, meat processing, you know, efforts in the United States. You know, that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
You know, have you heard of the concept of a food desert?
No, what is that?
It's just a area in a metropolitan area that just doesn't, most of the population doesn't have access to high quality, you know, locally grown, organically produced
right.
food
Like Singapore?
I don't know about Singapore specifically, but I'm thinking like, you know, middle America, you know, like the suburbs of, you know, like large cities.
Right. So typically islands don't get like fresh food, right? They,
yeah,
it's like very highly priced. So the opposite end of it is like if you're obviously in a,
it's metaphorical, right? It's not an actual island. It's like an area, and you know, instead of land. So I think, you know, does the average individual have access to the quality of food, nutrient dense, you know, high quality food that you or I might have? Like, no. Is that?
But even the access we have, is that nutrient dense? Is question mark.
It depends. I think. You know, it depends on like how rigorous you're assessing that. You know, I don't know if you're married, but like my wife has made it a point to remove, you know, anything that's got you know, forever chemicals, or she's pretty rigorous about, you know, thinking through where our food comes from and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think that she's alone in that effort, right? I think there's a consumer willingness to pay even a premium for knowing where your food comes from and the quality of it. And so I don't know what this looks like, you know, over the next 10 years. I just think that there's kind of like a cultural movement, a cost structure, a bending to the cost structure curve potentially in favor of different models for food production that I think is interesting.
Next door for backyard fresh food.
I'm a next door, but I think like these vertical farming companies like Plenty and Iron Ox and these folks, I think they were just like 10 years before their time potentially.
Yeah.
I think so. That's an area that
fascinating. What's the most okay, maybe you're not willing to discuss your current thesis you're developing.
Well, that's a current thesis. I haven't made an investment there.
Oh, interesting. What's the most contrarian thought you've had this year that most people have disagreed with you on?
How very Tealian of you.
Yeah, I know.
I think the investment community is on fire about like robotics having their ChatGPT moment, this foundation model for robotics, this type of thing. And
physical AI.
I think that's a lot of hype. I think it's a lot of hype.
Why do you think that's a lot of hype?
Robotics development doesn't work like that. It's a iterative, you know, grind your way to performance type capability. You know, the company that's pioneered foundation models for robotics is Wave. You know, the company started in 2017. And so I have like firsthand experience knowing exactly what that development cycle looks like. And I think we're very, very far away still from having like a general purpose, you know, AGI-esque, you know, model capability that you could just put into any hardware embodiment form factor, and it functions against that control policy with the requisite reliability and performance and safety necessary to drive value in the physical world. And so I think, you know, the idea that there'll be like one foundation model for robotics to rule them all, or that, you know, it's going to have it's like you're building the open AI for robotics. I just don't know that it's a cute framework. And it's certainly been effective in convincing investors. But I don't think that that's the way the category will unfold.
That's how OpenAI started. No, they wanted to do, or with robots and then pivoted to games, something like that. I'm
not familiar.
But so humanoid robots. What's the bull case? What's the bear case versus single-use robots in the next 5 years?
The team at Mytra that consists of a lot of folks that came from the Optimist program at Tesla. Chris Walty was instrumental in standing that up. The way they frame this is humanoids are like ninth inning robotics, right? And we're kind of in the second or third inning. I think there's some really fantastic prototype work going on, but scaling a production system to tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of units, managing those, releasing software effectively to those, that's a very, very challenging thing to do.
Right.
I think a lot, this isn't, a lot's been talked about this recently as a result of like the critical minerals, geopolitical, tug of war dynamic that we have going on. But most of our magnets and as a result, motors and actuators, we don't even produce them in this country. So I think and the performance, the torque density, the power requirements of those motors and actuators, the cost structure, at the hardware level alone challenges the performance capabilities and the unit economics of these humanoid systems at scale. So I think for me, the humanoid effort right now, it reminds me it reminds me almost eerily of the first wave of self-driving cars, where you have, huge TAMs, right? It's like very easy to do oh my gosh, a humanoid in every home.
Of course, it makes sense.
Of course this makes sense. And as a result of huge TAMs, you have very enterprising founders that are able to build and sell, that are able to go convince investors that the time is now to go build these types of capabilities. I think most of the companies that are well-funded and working on this problem today won't be here a few years from now. Some may endeavor, some might be effective in capitalizing themselves and managing that capital efficiently to get to the other side of the kind of Gartner hype cycle here. I wouldn't presume to predict, which ones those will be, but I would wager that there will be a few. And on the other side of the hype cycle and that trough of disillusionment, there are probably some pretty valuable companies to be built. I have a hard time predicting what that trough of disillusionment time period is going to be.
Right.
And so I have a clear understanding objectively of what the system performance, cost structure, reliability, scalability metrics need to look like. And I'm kind of watching and waiting for those types of moments.
Yeah, I know. If I guess anyone said that we could predict any of this, we would be lying, because in 2022 it felt like the apes are going to take over the world.
The apes are going to take
over. The bored apes were everywhere. The cyberpunks were everywhere.
Those apes. See, this is how not in the crypto game I am. I didn't even know what that reference was for a sec.
They raised $500 million.
It's crazy. But that's not, I'm old enough now where I've seen a few of these cycles. I remember when the first drone cycle, the UAV cycle in 2012, 13, 14, and you had companies raise hundreds of millions of dollars, which at the time was a lot, for building drone companies, right? And so you see these ebbs and flows, and I always like to be engaging in a new technology category, or let's say a technology category that hasn't found that commercial scale right at that trough of disillusionment period, right when all of the spectators and tourists and charlatans have said, okay, this is never going to work, or we lost all our money, we're giving up on this. And then the true believers, the true builders are still there, grinding it out, getting to commercial viability. I love being in that kind of zone from an early stage investment.
If you're 4 or 5 years early on that, then that is the prime time for you, and hundreds of millions of dollars are going in.
Yeah, I'm not very good at picking out the right targets on that first hype cycle.
Yeah.
There are some firms that seem to do a great job of that. I'm trying to build real products that drive business value and foundational business creation from that value.
Is it because of their marketing engines?
Is it because of their marketing engines? I don't know that that's necessarily.
Well, actually, more on that. I don't know if Eclipse does a lot. You don't seem to have a media empire from what I know. Right. And it's a sizable fund with like great success, right? Like you're one of the OGs in the space.
It's very kind of you.
What's going on in the macro venture capital sort of, cinematic universe where media is becoming a very big component of, I guess, strategy, whether that's, I guess, emerging managers or more established firms?
I don't presume to be a media expert. I'm working every single day to just get better at the craft of company building and early stage, investing. It would be naive of me not to, acknowledge at least that like clearly there are investment platforms that have made, that media strategy a big part of their overall firm strategy. And, I think like everything, you got to play the game on the field, and the field is dynamic. And I think you would note if you went back and did, what's the website that allows you to go back and look at websites?
Wayback Machine.
Yes. If you went to the Wayback Machine and looked at Eclipse in 2016, 17, 18, you would see that we've gotten better. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we still got a ways to go, but we've leaned into this a little bit. It's hard. I think the thing I wrestle with every single day is the only thing that matters in this business is generating returns for my investors. It's the only thing that matters. We're fortunate enough to be backed by some of the best organizations in the world with missions that are as inspiring as they possibly could be. Right, MacArthur Foundation and Alfred DuPont Trust, and some of these just all the university endowments and pension funds, and these are wonderful organizations where if we're successful in generating DPI for them, they're able to move the world forward in a material way. I'm a beneficiary of scholarship money to go to college. My mom is a school teacher and collects a pension, a retired school teacher and collects a pension. So the only thing that matters is generating a return for them. And so I often ask myself, does that blog post I wrote on, root cause analysis when things go to, what with that first gen product, is that in service of that mission? And I'm constantly trying to allocate, ask myself that question on time allocation. I'm sure there's some amount of public facing communication and marketing that is important in order for our customers, whether they be the LP partners or our founder partners, to understand who we are, what we stand for, what we're trying to be in this world, how we can serve them most effectively. But I try to be pretty focused on quality of that work and not quantity of that work. Because the most important thing is how am I moving the needle every single day for the companies whose boards I sit on.
Right. No, that makes a ton of sense. You're involved in this small movement called Reindustrialize, which is also an annual event now, which our friends organize.
I went for the first time this year, and it was the second time they did the event, and they do a great job. And I think, like, you asked me the question about like the EAC folks and Dynamite, like all these different flavors. I think that's another great tribe. That's another great like contingent of the tribe. And if your mission is to build and re-domicile critical industries here in the United States to enable us to build better products faster, or deter our adversaries, or re-fortify from a national security perspective.
What does that look like practically?
What are
Reindustrialization? What is it like? What are a couple examples, and what does that look like practically?
I think that there are critical components to building a lot of the integrated solutions that companies in our portfolio are building that we can only source at the performance and cost levels needed from China. And that's a problem. That's a national security issue. And so it looks like, in some key areas, making investments, subsidizing in some way, shape, or form, recently, if you look at what happens with the Mountain Pass transaction, even providing like pricing floors in order to catalyze a critical industry forward. I'm not an advocate for doing that across all industries. I think price controls across everything probably isn't great, but you're starting to see that type of effort. I think more than anything, when it comes to the secular tailwind, like the government support that we're seeing increasingly for builders in these categories, what I'm excited about is two things. One is the creativity I'm seeing, and the speed that I'm seeing. We're just seeing, you know, we're seeing new things tried, right? New strategies, new procurement strategies, new funding strategies, both non-dilutive and equity financing. You're seeing, you know, I mean, if you look at what's going on in the Pentagon right now,
right?
Deputy Secretary of War Steve Feinberg he's a very serious man. He is a tried and true businessman and an operator, and he is running that place, you know, in that fashion. And like, I think that's a great thing. And so, speed and velocity, velocity of decision making and capital allocation, and then also the creativity to try new things. Like, that's not something that we've seen over the last few decades from different areas of the government. And so I think, is everything going to work? No. Is it going to be perfect all the time? Absolutely not. My hope is that, like with building companies or doing anything really, like they'll be learning an iteration rate, and we'll find a better a way of the government will find a better way to support builders across these categories.
And not all these opportunities are venture fundable, I'm guessing, right? There are different financing models that probably need to fund these.
That's right. I think, you know, the best way to re-domicile manufacturing or critical components in the supply chain is through market demand, right? And so all of a sudden, if we've got a rapidly growing robotics, you know, ecosystem here that's doing applied work, you know, it stands to reason that some of the critical components necessary to you know, exist here at the right cost and performance levels, you know, in order to be able to be sourced locally and accelerate development timelines. Like, my hope is that market dynamics will drive that into existence.
Final few questions. One, we had Shaheen from Lux on the pod, and I asked him this question around how does, you know, breakthrough innovation happen? What time cycles do you evaluate it under? And then he said this very interesting thing around share price is like sort of different from you know, when you actually get breakthroughs in a company.
Share price is different. What I wasn't there, so what was his meaning behind that?
I think the meaning behind that was that you know, maybe it's a breakthrough is 10 years in the making, but like your job is how you allocate resources. That's my understanding. That's how he said it. And maybe your job as a CEO, as, you know, founder of a company, is to accrue value for your shareholders, your investors, you know, increasing the price of share price, you know, over a 10-year timeline, and those two are not always related.
Okay, I think that is like over a 20-year period.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about this earlier today, right? Like, what's the Benjamin Graham line of, like, the stock market in the short term is a voting machine, and in the long term is a weighing machine.
Right.
I think, like, the same thing holds true here, right? What are we endeavoring to do? We're endeavoring to build businesses that you know, generate billions of dollars of revenue with strong margin structure and free cash flow margins that you know, are eye popping, right? Are mouth watering. You know, from the technology you know, category, right? The best way to do that, in my experience, is to build a, you know, massively market dislocating technology capability that is orders of magnitude better than the status quo. Not incrementally, not a multiple, not a nice to have, but a massive step function and improvement, or multiple step functions and improvement. That necessitates, you know, a breakthrough, an engineering execution breakthrough.
Right.
I think the thing at the early stage that I'm really trying to become more adept at ascertaining is it an engineering execution driven breakthrough, or is it, again, going back to that net new invention?
Yeah.
And so if you look at Cerebras systems, right, you know, wafer scale manufacturing had been tried many, 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 many times. You know, there's a famous company from the semiconductor company from the 1980s, Trilogy. I think it's Trilogy. Who's going to check me back on that? I should know that. that had pioneered, like really tried to do this and was unsuccessful, right? At the time, lost just unbelievable amounts of capital on a relative basis. Cerebras was successful in getting to the yield levels on a wafer scale, fabrication effort that have resulted in some elements of what's driving like a tremendous breakthrough and a step function improvement, multiple step functions improvement over the status quo solutions in the market. So, that execution is what I'm trying to underwrite, and the risk associated with that execution is what I'm trying to underwrite. On the share price side of things, sometimes investors in the private markets get ahead of themselves. Founders have to have the discipline to not let that happen, because it's very easy to, especially in these types of categories, to take a high price, experience a setback or delay, and all of a sudden, like, you're in a challenging position. And so you want to be like thoughtful and disciplined about how much capital you take always, but also the price that you take that capital at, so that you're continuing to appreciate the share price through fundamentals over time. I think a great recent example of this, and I think Trey over at Founders Fund has talked about this publicly, where like they weren't at Anduril when they were fundraising, they weren't always taking the highest price.
Right.
They could have taken the prices much higher, but they stayed pretty disciplined and always made it so that there was an overwhelming amount of demand for that asset. And that's always resulted in, outsized demand at the next round, right? Through material execution. So maybe that's what he was talking about. I think like there's a
I think so. Okay, favorite show you watched recently?
Favorite show I watched recently. I don't watch a whole lot of TV. I'm kind of like making my way through Peaky Blinders right now.
Oh, that's a good one.
Do you like that one?
Yeah.
What's the one I'm away from home? I'll watch a little bit of that.
Have you seen Severance?
I've seen no.
Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's some good sci-fi.
My wife watched that one without me. So that's a good one. I'm like a huge Breaking Bad guy. I think if you were to stack rank. Have you ever watched that? I love Breaking Bad. I love, this is kind of cheesy, but I love The West Wing.
Oh, The West Wing was good.
I like that. I like that Aaron Sorkin writing style. Yeah.
What did you like about The West Wing?
The writing, the early seasons, like the Aaron Sorkin seasons.
Did you end up seeing House of Cards?
Yeah. That started off great, then like went off. Cool.
Yeah.
I think what I liked about West Wing, I know it might be an idealistic view, but like that to picture, our representatives and operators, in government, behaving with that level of intentionality and pragmatic problem solving, like that would be a beautiful thing. I don't know if that is the case or if that is always.
Is it more House of Cards or is it more The West Wing?
Yeah. But I think like the idealist in me like appreciated that aspect of it.
Is there a book you've read recently that's impacted how you think or changed, made you go 180 on something?
This one's not recently, but I think like the Power Law, like everyone talks about that book, like that.
Great book on history of venture capital.
Just the history of venture capital. I just love that. I love that book. That's probably the one that's impacted me over the last few years.
What changed your?
I think first of all, I just love history. I'm a student of technology history. I think like there are patterns that you can observe through every cycle that may not rhyme perfectly, but they're or may not transfer perfectly, but they do rhyme. I'm maybe as a side note, I'm really excited about a current category of SaaS products right now. Can I tell you about that?
This is interesting. Partner at Eclipse, investing in industrials, is excited about a SaaS category. Let's go.
I think what comes from my vantage point in robotics, I think like robotics is following a similar pattern to historical computing cycles, where like the first successful enterprises had to do everything themselves, all the applied development work and all of like the development of the infrastructure and tooling and capabilities necessary to support that development work. And what I've witnessed in our portfolio over the last decade is needing to kind of engineer an applied solution and then take a break to like engineer the scaffolding to support the next level of applied engineering has slowed down the development velocity. And it makes a lot of sense that would be the case. And so the prediction that we had was, as the applied robotics market becomes a market, like actually there's like the beginnings of, commercial viability, you will see the emergence of companies that are focused on providing dedicated, best-in-class developer tooling and infrastructure to those applied developers.
Oh, interesting. So a completely new class of developer tools.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's never the case that the thing you build for one category is also perfect for the next category as well. And so why would database management or infrastructure to move data or visualization capabilities that were designed for, or observation capabilities that were designed for the cloud computing category, the mobile category, also be purposefully built for a new class of computing that is AI in the physical world. And I'm excited about where that's heading. We have an investment in a company called Foxglove that I think is a leader in the space. But more importantly, I think that the emergence of those really capable tools results in like a compounding of the velocity of development across a category. And so we should be able to develop more complex, higher value capabilities faster with less capital as a result of having better infrastructure, better open source, software, developer tools that help across, visualization, release management, verification and validation, all these types of interesting engineering, elements of the engineer's daily effort. And I think that's going to be a huge catalyst for maturation of the category.
What other history books have you been reading on technology?
What other history books have I been reading about technology? I read like a lot of like blogs. I read like Ben Thompson.
Yes.
I read
Acquired, or that's a good tech history show.
I love what is Ben
and David. Yeah,
I love what they have done. I absolutely love what they have done. And that's not, I could, every now and then I'll see one on there that I consume. I listen to David Senra's Founders
that's
podcast.
A tech history. Yes. Okay.
Like that one is really good. I listen to Patrick O'Shaughnessy's Invest Like the Best.
I guess like podcasters have articulated tech history better now than probably some books that are out there. Maybe. Yeah. Maybe it's the storytelling. Maybe it's the research involved, relevancy.
Maybe. Also might just be like the medium.
Yeah, maybe it's the medium.
Maybe
it's our generation's medium.
It's our generation's medium. That's consumable for me.
Yeah. When you're on a plane ride from.
Poor Charlie's Almanac. I'm halfway through that on Audible.
It's on my list.
And that's a good one too.
It's like a timeless book.
That's a timeless book. So, yeah.
Favorite food?
My favorite food?
Yeah, it couldn't have been the eggs we had this morning. Because you were trying to, put sauce on it to make sure that flavor.
I always put hot sauce on my eggs. My favorite food is probably a cheeseburger. Maybe like good Italian. I love lasagna.
Oh. Is it In-N-Out? Is it Shake Shack?
No.
Is it like a
no
homemade?
No. I'm pretty skillful on the grill.
Okay. Should it come out?
Come sometime.
Okay.
So I can make a mean. We do bison in our family. We do bison burgers.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So drive out to Tahoe for bison burgers. This is it from us. Seth, thank you for coming out on the show. This was awesome.